Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. In the last episode, Gelon was attacked by a slave army coming out of Octaduron while he was campaigning in Sequani territory. The slave army seemed quite powerful and had an advantage, but Gelon was able to gain advantages of his own by taking superior terrain and outflanking the enemy with hidden forces, meaning the slave army was mostly destroyed in the engagement. He was healthy enough to go straight away to besiege Vesontio, the Sequani city. The balance bar again wasn't in his favour, but by sieging the enemy out of their defences to face them in a field battle, he was able to even the odds. And then once we got them into the field, we outmaneuvered them using our cavalry advantage and the fact that the enemy force was fractured between multiple groups to wipe them out even using inferior troops. So with them gone, the garrison at Vesontio had no choice but to surrender. Gelon looted the town, meaning the Sequani are now severely weakened, but he will have to rebuild his defences at Vesontio against the new possible antagonist to the north, the Boii. Let's continue. Leaving his troops in the hands of trusted officers, Eusebius spent many weeks in Massalia, gauging the mood of the council and the less than hidden Timucoi shills. He discovered that some information given to him by Xenon years before rang true, that the council had no vision beyond the city walls, and that the scheming Melanthios had kept them this way quite deliberately, planning to become the puppet master of all foreign ventures himself. Eusebius had received enough visits from the aging politician's agents to know that he had almost succeeded. The question was whether his success was going to be a blessing or a curse. We're back and we've just taken Vesontio. You can see the settlement's in bad condition. I'm repairing some of the buildings using some of the money I made from looting it to repair the buildings that will make more money going forwards. You can also see I can recruit a couple of Germanic units here, including Skutzians, a high quality archer unit which I am going to recruit into Gelon's forces. They are superior to the Greek archers because they can hide and have longer range. Nearby, the remnants of the slave uprising are raiding my territory in Octaduron. Cretius is standing ready to attack them. I upgrade his medium spearmen with superior weaponry and shields and then go in for the fight. The enemy force isn't that good, the balance bar is quite far in their favour. They've taken attrition and were defeated in battle, so even though their troops are better than mine, they don't have enough to have a real chance in this battle. I opted for a protective stance and attacked. I only won a close victory and I actually didn't manage to destroy all of the enemies. I enslaved the ones I could capture and the survivors ran off into the forested mountains. I decided to chase them down with my surviving forces. This time the balance bar very far in my favour. I'm just going to wipe out the remnants, again using protective stance to make sure I don't take any losses because I have a ranged advantage. I can do that. So the slave uprising is now finally over. Again, I enslaved the survivors. A message appears telling me that the slave uprising has been crushed, so it's official. But because it's winter, Cretius has to make it back to the road to not take winter attrition even in my own province. Unfortunately, I don't manage to do that, so he is now going to take attrition for a turn and will have to wait to regenerate troops for an extra long time. Now I decided it was time to try and get Gelon into the Timucoi. He is very influential and might actually manage to give the Timucoi some real power because of his popularity. The bribe is successful, so we can see Gelon immediately appears as the leading member of the Timucoi. His influence has been downed by a third. He now has 95 gravitas, and the influence of the Timucoi hasn't actually gone up at all, but hopefully over time his presence as an official in the organization will increase our power. We'll see how that goes. Moving on, you can see the Sestani have declared war on the Lusitani. It seems a war in the Iberian Peninsula is about to occur. This is good for me actually because the Sestani are people who probably will betray me at some point, so it would be good if they could waste their strength fighting the Lusitani. The Lusitani are actually very powerful. They've conquered lots of Carthage's old territory and are actually more powerful than the Sestani, so may win that war if it goes on for a particularly long time. As for my new neighbour, the Boii, I was really desperate to get trade with them, or at least non-aggression if I could, but they were not taking anything. I also wanted to try and make a client state of the Sequani, so I didn't have to chase them down with my surviving forces, because I need to use Gelon's army just to keep public order in Vesontio and Rhaetia e Noricum. Unfortunately, they weren't willing to accept any good deals from me. They wanted peace, but they didn't want peace with any riders, so I didn't get any deals. Now, because we do have public order problems and cultural problems, I am recruiting Climere, a new noblewoman, to join Jelon from the Timukoi's pool of agents to help him administer his new territories in the north of Cisalpina and moving into Gaul. Moving on into the next turn, we get an adoption message. This basically means that the council are trying to get Cretheus back off the Timukoi and into their own sphere of influence once again. I'm going to pay money to stop that adoption because I do want Cretheus on my side. I also have a mission issued, which theoretically is the mission of the Timukoi in this case, which is to capture any settlement. Within 5 turns, I'll receive a treasury reward of 1,250 if I do that. That's possible because I may be able to attack the Sequani. We'll see how it goes. Now the Sestani decide to make their yearly offer of military access, or their yearly demand as well, and this time they want 300 on top of it. So it seems they're getting a little bit more pushy for this military access, but of course I'm not going to give it to them. They're devious and there's no advantage to me having that access. The Sequani forces move back into Vesontio. They are on the way, and we learn that the Lusitani have declared peace with the Sestani, so that war was very short. Neither side lost any territory, so that's annoying. Perhaps the Sestani are going to do something now that they're trying to get military access as well. So here's that Sequani force. It's full of heavy spearmen and medium swordsmen, not quite full up with 20 units, but 3/4 full, enough to be a threat. You can see they've encamped as well, fortified their position on the road leading out of Vesontio. But actually, when I saw this, I thought this is quite good for us, because Jelon and the Heralds of Massalia have siege weapons, meaning they actually will do very well attacking a fortified position. The enemy have nothing to fire back at me. My ranged advantage means I can sit outside the fort and just rain stones and bolts upon them, which will either destroy them or force them to abandon the fort, so they won't take any advantage from defending their position. Plus, the balance bar is already in our favour because of a numerical advantage.
I was sent by Melanthios, of course. Now that you are a member of the Timokoi, we have become more public than ever, and it is no longer wise to leave matters of state in your dirty hands. For example, I notice your army is camped on the ruins of what would have been a perfectly good colony for the Republic. But you aren't a lost cause, and that's where I come in. Anything you wish to declare to the people goes through me from now on. I have a plan to turn our image into one that will benefit the Timokoi and win you the hearts of these natives you tend to so strongly divide. Oh, and if you ever touch me, it'll be you who is suddenly divided, head from shoulders.
So I've got my artillery set up ready to fire at the enemy's camp. I can deploy in range, so I started firing the second the battle started. The enemy army wasn't going to take it though. They decided to take an intelligent move and just run straight out of their camp. They're not going to hang around and defend their capture point while I outrange them like this. So this kind of leaves my plan a little bit high and dry, because I was going to attack the flanks of their camp with these strike teams whilst my artillery pounded them from the centre, but the enemy's entire army is rushing towards that central group, and of course will have a big local numerical advantage over them, plus actually probably a man-for-man advantage in many cases, like with these berserkers who are leading the attack. They're taking casualties to the bolts from my scorpions who are firing at them, but the accuracy and rate of fire is too low to really do any damage. I'm rushing troops forward to form a line in front of my artillery, ready to hold the enemy in place. I have these medium Greek spears on both wings of this line, not a particularly powerful unit. Hoplite in the center will be able to hold the enemy a little bit more, and hopefully the javelins behind the line will be able to kill many enemies whilst they're locked in combat with me. My group from the west is going to rush in to support, whilst my group from the east is actually going to go ahead with its original plan. It's going to rush into the camp and capture the central point, which will decrease the morale of all of the enemy units. This means I have to just hold out until I can do that and get that morale shot against the enemy, but the enemy are going to be pressing really hard against this central group. You can see the berserkers charging in a wedge formation. We're bombarding them with jabs, but it's not stopping them. They slam into my medium spears. Of course, these berserkers will have a nice advantage fighting against the medium spears. They don't manage to break through the line, but they get pretty deep into the formation, and my men must now fight very hard to hold them off. Further down the line, similar things are happening. Enemy swordsmen crushing into my hoplites. These heavy swords will struggle to get through the hoplites, but they do have a pretty good chance of killing several of my men there. Further down the line, my medium spears are again engaging with heavy swords. That situation won't go very well. The longer we wait, the more of my men will be killed by the enemy's superior melee skills. The enemy's very heavy spears led by their general are chasing my cavalry around, which is really annoying. They have some lighter spears who have been caught by my lighter spears coming in as reinforcements from that western group. So we're going to have a pretty even fight here. I'll be supported by some of my missile units coming from the west as well. So overall I'm expecting a victory in this part of the battlefield. A little further up we can see I've got another unit coming in to charge some of the enemy's Gaelish. My medium spears are inferior to the enemy, both in terms of their ranged attack and their melee attack, so the Gaelish are completely unaffected by my spear barrage. They kill a bunch of my troops as I come in, and then I slam into them with a charge that doesn't really do anything, so we'll now grind against them. The enemy have reinforcements coming in, so over time that fight will go their way. Meanwhile, we have now started capturing the enemy's camp with these heavy swordsmen, and I'm rushing archers through the camp. They're not going to stop to capture it because they can go and start firing into the backs of the enemy units, attacking my medium spears, hopefully helping me even out the odds there with some long-range archer fire. Next up, I need to sort out the situation with the enemy's missile units, one of which is actually just some Gaelish here. You can see they're standing back from the line, throwing javelins in, the classic maneuver that I hate, and they're really doing damage. You can see the end of my line here is covered in allied bodies, and more are being added to the pile by the second. We need to take them out. Luckily, my cavalry are in position to start attacking the back of the enemy force. First, we're going to wipe out these light skirmishers, just get rid of them entirely, stop them from having any chance of harassing my line. Now luckily the enemy's general unit has come and got engaged with my medium spears. Bad for my men, but because they're no longer chasing the cavalry in the area, those cavalry can come back into the fight, and again they slam into a light enemy unit. They're going to be destroyed very quickly by the medium cavalry assault. So we're getting rid of all of these units, giving us a lot of room to maneuver around the back of the enemy forces. So very quickly I can rush in and start attacking the enemy's swords with my cavalry from behind. Here in the center, the cavalry are pushing those swords against my hoplite phalanx, inflicting casualties and giving a morale shock for the attack from behind. The enemy are holding on though, and the hoplite phalanx and cavalry aren't all that good at fighting these units, so we're not killing very many. But then Gelon comes in with his very heavy cav. His attack clips the side and causes both units to waver. He then uses his war cry ability, which reduces their morale and causes them to break. And of course now they're breaking while surrounded by my men, which means they're going to take a lot of casualties. Further down the line, another enemy unit is breaking, but those berserkers are still fighting on against my spearmen, with my cavalry now in there helping out. They've killed almost half of my spearmen. The line's looking very thin compared to how it looked earlier. They've done very well against my troops, so it's unfortunate to have lost all these men, but we have held one of the enemy's best units in position and killed a massive number of them. The cavalry will help to finish them off very soon. On the other end of the line, the enemy's Gaelish are engaging with my spears, and they too have killed a massive number of my spearmen who are just inferior in quality. They also have a numerical advantage, as you can see, quite a large one. The presence of spears there makes it harder for me to use a cavalry back attack to clear up that situation. What I actually decided to do was to rush my heaviest troops from the center, not to help the right flank, but to attack the enemy's general. I need to destroy this general to destroy their morale, and that is going to combine with the fact I've captured their camp to mean the enemy has so many morale penalties I might be able to just get the rest of the enemy's army to rout. So these men have to hold on while those troops go and do that. I actually did have some light troops who were freed up, so I decided to make a charge against the back of the enemy's army just to inflict a morale shock, very unlikely to inflict casualties. So I rush in with some both Gallic and Greek light forces. We slam into the back of the enemy's unit, and one of them routs upon their hit. So this means this spear unit is now going to survive much longer, and I don't even need that much more time because, as you can see, the other unit just routs. The army losses of the enemy are now too heavy, leading to a decisive victory for our forces. So our main line facing off the enemy there did take quite a lot of casualties. It was a messy fight, and a fight that didn't quite go as I expected, but overall we have crushed the Sequani counter-invasion into Vesontio, so things are looking good. Gentlemen of the Council, I first apologise for the absence of my sponsor Melanthios, who has taken ill and must remain in Mediolanum until the spring. I shall deliver the message he had planned on his behalf. The crux of the issue is likely one that you have all discussed at length, both in this chamber and privately, some of you even discussing it with members of my order, the Timukhoi. The contents of this declaration is contained in brief within its title: the proclamation of the new Massalian Republic and the establishment of the executive rule of the Timukhoi. There shall be no vote on the wording of this title. The Sequani fortified position is crushed and the army is now mostly gone. A decisive victory for Gelon's forces. So that has crushed their counter-invasion. As I said, Vesontio is now going to be safe. Most of our forces are alive. We can even now consider going on to attack their province. The only thing that would stop me is the public order situation in Vesontio, which is deteriorating but not all that quickly, so I do have some time. Gelon could stay behind to patrol the region to help, but I would have to move him back to do that, because if you're attacked while patrolling, you are ambushed and have low morale. But I am going to push on, so I first advance to attack the survivors from that Sequani force. I'll use a protective stance to minimise my casualties as I move on. So we work through them pretty easily, lose a couple of men in the process, but not too bad. I enslave the captives, and now I'm going to move on to that little bridge, the border between Uberzis and Vesontio, which will provide a defensive position if the Sequani do somehow have another army that attacks. And in the past, they've always attacked with a 3/4 stack and then a quarter stack, so I'm almost expecting them to come with a small army to attack me now. And if they don't, I'll be in a position to move on to attack their province next turn. I'll also get a chance to regenerate some troops, so it's a handy place to stop for me. Now, in the winter, there was actually a blizzard in Vesontio, so this kind of forced my hand. If I don't leave the province, I'm going to suffer attrition, so I have to move into enemy territory yet again. It's the same thing that happened with the invasion of Vesontio itself. I'm now safe from attrition, but I am stuck in enemy territory and I can't move very far. There's a massive penalty on movement range, so obviously I can't get up to the settlement, so I can just inch my way forwards. I keep enough movement points so I can fortify my position. We can now see the Sequani are recruiting some more forces, so they may attack me soon, but I'm fortified and have a massive numerical superiority, so I'm pretty safe in this gradual invasion. Back near Massalia, Eusebius and the Daemons Eponymous have returned to their home in order to refit the army. I'm throwing out some of the lighter forces. I was wondering whether to bring in some Greek heavy cavalry or some Celtic medium cav, and the Celtic medium cavalry are actually a little bit better in terms of stats, so I decided to bring them in, and some ranked up pikemen. You can see everything I recruit in Massalia starts with high ranks as a result of various bonuses I've got going on there. Now, the Sequani come back during the end turn sequence with another peace deal, but they're still not willing to accept clienthood, which is what I really want. I thought, okay, maybe they'll accept trade, but no, not even that. They're not willing to concede anything in this peace deal, so I was not willing to listen to it any further. Now, because of that blizzard, the garrison army at Vesontio suffers desertion, but hopefully it's not going to be attacked anytime soon. The garrison army is only small at the moment, but it's enough to hold off against minor attacks, and the Sequani do love their minor attacks. You can see that there's also an unhappy populace in the area, so I'm going to have to go back and sort that out soon. Interestingly, the Sestani have declared war on the Carthaginians now, so it seems they're just going around the Mediterranean declaring war on all of the major powers. The Carthaginians still control their home and some of the Roman territory, so they're still pretty powerful, though not the great empire they started off thanks to the Lusitani. But anyway, back on my battlefront, the Sequani have put some forces on the road in front of Gelon, so it seems we're going to have to go through them in order to attack Uberzis. But the garrison army from the town is going to come out and join them, so we're going to have to fight this battle. The balance bar looks very bad indeed, because the enemy is going to have a big numerical advantage in this fight. So we're going to have to assault the fort and then destroy the reinforcements, or wait for the reinforcements to go inside the fort and destroy them both, or allow the enemy to leave their fort, because we do have a ranged advantage, and see how they team up with their reinforcements. Overall, I think we can overcome the balance bar yet again just by outmaneuvering the enemy. So I started with my artillery in a position to fire on the enemy's fort and immediately began moving my forces forward so I could set up a line in front of the artillery in case the enemy immediately charged my position with their small army inside the fort itself. That would be a bad decision from them because the army inside the fort is very small and it has very light forces. It's mostly light spears, so you won't do much against my line. So they intelligently decide not to attack me. At first they did actually start leaving the fortress, but then they started moving back inside. So that's kind of good because it gives me an opportunity to spend more time firing at them with my artillery, but it's not going to do all that much. Their actual objective was to move all the way back to the other side of the map where their reinforcement army was coming in. You can see their light forces here, very unarmoured, not very powerful looking at all. Their reinforcement army looks much better now coming onto the field from the east. So I assumed that what they were going to do was march over to join up with their reinforcements, and then the reinforcements would come through the fortress to attack me as if they had been there the whole time. So I started setting up a formation just outside the fort, hoping they would attack with a big cavalry wing on the right. To allow me to be more manoeuvrable in this position, I use my fire archers to start destroying the enemy's towers. It only takes a couple of volleys of fire arrows to take them out. The enemy won't have that much chance to fire back at me, so it's relatively safe to do this, and I had to do something while waiting for the enemy to form up anyway. So that will just allow me to move close to the fort if needs be in order to contain them inside it if I want to really siege them. But actually the enemy were going to ignore the fort. They came right around it and were going to go for a field battle beside the fort. So luckily destroying the towers is still useful for me because I can now form up a little bit closer to the enemy's position as they come in. I could actually have formed up with my left flank touching the edge of the fort in order to stop them outflanking me, which I didn't actually think of at the time. But luckily the enemy aren't going to exploit my left flank anyway. It's my right flank that the enemy are going to be most interested in, as we'll see. So the enemy come towards me. You can see I formed a kind of bowl formation, but the right flank is quite weak. It has cavalry and my lighter spears defending it, so it's definitely the weak point. The center is the strongest point, and the left only has medium spears. Those are the guys we've seen lose to enemy swordsmen before, so they'll struggle to hold that for a long time, but they're going to do better than the Gallic levied forces. So the enemy advanced into a skirmish position and started attacking me, and then they seemed indecisive. They kept half their forces guarding their skirmishers, but a few regiments decided to rush out and just attack me, ending the skirmish phase immediately. So basically it's going to be a small attack on my line, which is good for me because I'm going to concentrate missile fire on these individual units advancing forwards, which will reduce their numbers before they attack. So here you can see Gallic tribesmen rushing to attack my mercenary spears. They're not going to do all that much, being of pretty much equal quality on both sides, so we're locking the enemy in place. Very good there. All along the line they're doing similar things. Here it's swordsmen rushing into hoplites. That's an okay situation, especially because the archers just behind the hoplites are dealing massive casualties to these swordsmen. These powerful Germanic archers are very good against these sorts of units. Further down, my own swordsmen are holding off enemy swords. That's okay. Right on the end of the line, it's my medium spears holding enemy swords. That's not really okay. The enemy will break through here the longer the fight goes on. I've got javelins and the ballistas supporting them, but it won't do all that much. And right on the end, it's the enemy's light spears fighting with my medium spears, which should go okay, although the enemy do have very high attack values, so they'll kill a lot of me as I kill them. So you can see they've put those units into combat, still loads of units just waiting back with their skirmishers. They send in one more unit of swords to support their tribesmen, which means this part of the fight will now go in their favour over time, although luckily the swords are kind of stuck behind their own tribesmen, so not too many of them are getting involved in the fight. The swordsmen attacking my hoplites fall back. They took so many casualties fighting my archers that they couldn't fight on. The enemy's line still just stands there though, so the question was, am I going to allow them to do this? Because they're skirmishing with me as they do it with their slingers and archers and inflicting casualties on my line. So I want this situation to end. I want them to attack me, or I have to advance forward and join them in the battle over there. That means having an odd line which is broken up with some of these forces stuck behind fighting their first wave and other forces advancing to face the second wave. That is though what I decided to do in the end, because I thought it's probably safe enough to do. So gaps open up in my line as I charge forward. Actually the enemy charged forward just as I did at the same time, so we kind of met halfway. It wasn't so bad. So here you can see my swordsmen going into battle with the enemy swords. That should be okay. They're going to be backed up by the hoplites. It'll make things go definitely our way over time there. It does take a long time to work through them with hoplites. This unit of armed townsfolk actually did manage to exploit a gap in the line. They charged through the gap opened up by my hoplites moving over to fight the enemy's swords, and managed to attack Gelon, but Gelon is going to run away. He probably would do okay in melee combat with him, but I decided not to risk it, because I can just have him fall back while these archers bombard the townsfolk at close range, especially because the townsfolk are unshielded and unarmoured. The archers should be able to deal with them quite quickly. The left side of the line isn't looking all that good. The enemy have a big numeric advantage and a man-to-man advantage in many places. I've already lost more than half of my line here after just a couple of minutes of combat. The enemy are going to be able to break through. I need to bring some force around the back of the enemy so I can get them completely surrounded, because their morale is quite poor. In the centre, the enemy's heavy cavalry rush in to attack my swordsmen whilst they're engaged with enemy swords. This isn't good. The enemy's heavy cavalry will be good against my swords. Luckily, they're disciplined and well trained and manage to hold the enemy's cavalry go back for a cycle charge. Meanwhile, Gelon, having dealt with those armed townsfolk, is now fighting with an enemy tribesman. I noticed this and decided to pull him out of that, because that's not going to go well over time. And I'm going to do the same thing with these guys that I did with the townsfolk. Get all of the local missile forces to just focus on them while they're busy chasing Gelon around, so we should be able to take them down like that. The hoplites and swords fighting in the centre right are still doing okay. They're just about to defeat their opponents there. My cavalry have finally got involved in the battle. Now that the enemy have deployed all their reserves, I don't have to worry about getting caught on spears behind their lines, so I can start marauding around. We lock down the enemy's heavy cavalry in melee here. My guys are only medium cavalry, so they will lose, but I actually do have a huge numerical advantage in terms of cav, so I was willing to go into that engagement and just let it churn away. The enemy sent some swords in to help, but it's not going to do too much. Sending those swords in means they've abandoned fighting my swordsman here, so that's freed up a unit for me, and this squad of swords is going to be able to go and help my left flank very soon, which of course really needs the help because they're being pressed very heavily by the enemy. Now my hoplites, having defeated their opponents, came in to fight with the enemy's general and heavy cavalry, so that's going to save my medium cavalry from having to fight with them, which will both save their lives and free them up to attack other enemy units elsewhere. On the left, my swordsmen are now attacking the flank of this big triangular enemy formation. The spearmen themselves are barely holding out. Very few of the men are left, they're down to much less than half strength. Some places just a single man holding the enemy's huge armada of troops back. Luckily the swords coming in is going to shock them, especially when fighting with the enemy's light spears, who won't hold up for very long. I've also sent in archers and skirmishers to battle here, just to increase the manpower and to increase the number of units doing flank attacks to hopefully demoralize the enemy. So the enemy's generals locked down fighting my hoplite. My cavalry are freed up to come and fight enemy routing units who are coming back, mostly skirmishers who I routed earlier. Jalon himself decided it was time for him to really solve this battle. He just charges in to the danger point where the enemy are crushing our left flank and starts fighting with the enemy. Even though the enemy have spears in amongst this formation, they also have light forces like archers fighting here, so hopefully he'll be able to kill enough of them to cause a morale shock, and you can see some of the enemies start to fall back. So that should be enough to allow us to totally surround the survivors and really grind them down. My men are barely holding on here. You can see a disciplined line, one guy thick, who's fighting on against the enemy's spears, but just about managing to hold. So now that we're going to get them surrounded, the enemy will start to lose all of their morale, especially because they're now tired, haven't been fighting for the whole battle. And you can see we're pretty much controlling all of the territory behind their line. I've got cavalry and infantry marauding around, killing survivors. So it's going to be very easy for me to crush the surviving enemy forces on the line. I do so, and this wins a heroic victory. We took a good number of losses actually, especially on that left flank, but the enemy took far more because of their strange tactical decisions and the fact that we always managed to get enemy units fighting with our units who had an advantage against them, or everyone except on the left flank of course. So this victory means that Ubersis is now going to be ripe for whatever we want to do with it. The formal grab for power by the Timucoi was at first laughed off by the council, who knew how few of their own number were members of the pretentious group. But quickly it was found that in order to make anything outside the city happen, they had to go through administrators appointed by Cretius and Gelon. These men were more interested in the gold of their patrons than in their duty to the council. Increasingly, they found their supposed hero Eusebius to be less than interested in their concerns, apparently focusing on his own plan for his conquests in Cisalpina. The council had all the support it needed, but none of the raw power.